Welcome to Reddit Topics, where we make videos from comments on AskReddit. Plus, I may tell a joke every now and then. So, if you enjoy the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Let's get into the stories. Today we're going to be reading comments from the post. People who had an arranged marriage. Was the sex awkward initially? How did you break the ice? My first marriage was arranged-ish. My husband's family made an arrangement with my father when I was 12 that I would marry their middle son, who was 2 years older than me, when I was 18 and finished school. I knew him already. His sister was my best friend, and he was friends with my brothers. We never talked much until we made our engagement official and he had paid me my ma. And in about 6 months between our engagement and our wedding, we hung out and went on dates, talked on the phone, got to know each other. Personally, I grew to like him a lot, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I loved him. I grew to love him eventually, and he was a very nice, caring, sweet guy and treated me well. He supported me going to university. We had a good life together. We loved traveling together, and we both loved photography. We had been talking about having kids when I was finished with university. We weren't married very long, only 2 years, before he died in a car accident. I think we could have made things work with more time. Sex was fine. We were both virgins when we got married. I tried doing what I saw in porn, but it didn't work out too well. But like all things, we got better with practice. Throwaway because I'm a loser. Like a fool, I opted for an arranged marriage. The girl I was originally seeing was crazy, but something strange happens when you get rejected. More so than the hurt, you become incapable of making good decisions. Anyhow, I was introduced to a girl. She had different interests and didn't take too kindly to my casual humor, so like an idiot, I got engaged to her. Over the course of the engagement, I was really busy with work, so I didn't see her at all. Then came the marriage. It was surreal. There I was sitting on stage with a girl I hardly knew, getting married. Most of the people at the wedding were my parents' friends, etc. I hardly knew anyone there. Fast forward to the honeymoon. We were like awkward strangers. We actually never had sex on our honeymoon. Was the sex awkward? Absolutely. Fast forward 6 years later and we have a child. Did I make the right decision? If I wasn't a father, I'd leave tomorrow. I wouldn't let my parents choose my socks, but I let them choose my life partner. The loser that I am. So why am I sticking around? To cut a long story short, I wanted my child to do well in life. So I'm living an act. Do I have regrets? Don't we all? Am I a good husband? I never argue, never complain, and put on a smiling face. Have I ruined my life? Not really. I earn quite a lot, and unlike the BS you hear in the movies, money gives you great options in life, and I try to enjoy as much of it as possible. From a Muslim standpoint, I had an arranged marriage, but it really wasn't all that arranged. I met my wife through a family friend. We were introduced, our families were introduced too, and we spent about a year getting to know each other. Both of us at either point could have decided we're not interested, but we fell very much in love and got married. We discussed sex, contraception, etc. prior to getting married, so it wasn't a foreign topic. When we finally ended up having sex, the day after our wedding night, we were too exhausted that night. We took our time and went slow. It was very much enjoyable for the both of us, and we have sex nearly daily, now a year in. We were both virgins and had zero experience doing anything sexual with the opposite sex. Looking back now, I am really glad I got to experience all of that with her and only her. It makes it that much more special to me. My parents and aunt arranged a marriage for me, and I traveled back to my country and met her once before the marriage. First night, she was really shy and kept hiding under the blanket and pulling it away from me while giggling. Nothing happened that night. Then she got a call the next day from her mother and they kept talking for half an hour. It happened that later that night, when we were in bed, innocently watching TV, then she looked at me and said maybe the first complete sentence, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," in a nervous voice. So I laughed and played it funny, then started gently kissing, hugging, and joked a bit. Then 2 hours later, we are doing it. And now I have 2 kids from her and she turned 26 last month. Arranged isn't as bad as it sounds. But back in my place, it's normal to have arranged marriages and even marriages without seeing the bride. Mine was great, considering there are parents who wait outside the room to hear the daughter orgasm to make sure she is a virgin. This all happened in April last year. My wife is from a Muslim country originally, but her family is from the capital and quite modern. She has relatives, however, from a smaller village who are not quite as modern. So one of her second cousins, son of her dad's cousin, wants to get married because it is time already and he wants children. His mom interviews a few girls, but it took a while. Some of the girls she didn't like because they weren't traditional enough, and some of the girls' families didn't want because the guy's family was too strict. Even for a small village, things like the girl having to be Muslim, must wear hijab, pray 5 times a day, the whole ordeal. Finally, they find a girl who suits him. His mom approves and the girl's parents approve, so they organize the wedding for the next 2 weeks. Sadly, because of that, I couldn't go. We live in Western Europe and I need to tell my vacation days in advance, at least more than 2 weeks. But she could arrange it with her work to go for the wedding. My wife told me about the wedding. It was a super traditional Muslim wedding, which I would have loved to see because I have never been to one, although it was hard for me to understand a wedding without any alcohol. So the wedding happens and it ends early and everyone goes home to rest and sleep. My wife and his family, parents and sister go to the hotel, which is only an hour away. Then my wife's dad gets a call. I should say before that my wife's dad is very well considered in his extended family because he has a very good job in the center and works with high-profile people. Basically, a very respectable man. It was maybe 1 a.m. and he gets a call from his older sister saying that he needs to go back to the village immediately. There is an emergency. Him expecting it to be about money, he gets asked for money quite often, demands to know what's going on. So here's the fun part. The groom was a very traditional Muslim man. He had never had a date, never gone out with a girl, and followed his religion in a very strict way. He had barely talked to women in the past. The bride has also followed a similar path. So they finish the ceremony, they go to the room, and they realize they have absolutely no idea how to proceed. Like, these people did not know how to have sex. They had never watched a porn film. They never had sex education. No one taught to tell them what they would have to do in bed. They are wondering what to do. So they call this aunt, who is the eldest of the family, to tell them what to do. But the aunt feels that a woman cannot possibly describe to a man how to have sex. That is so inappropriate. So instead, she calls her younger brother, my father-in-law. My father-in-law doesn't want to hear about that crap. He is 1 hour away and it is really barely any of his business. It is late and he works the next day. Also, there must be many others more suitable for that kind of thing. At this point, my wife and her mom and sister are cracking up because they can't believe this is happening in 2013. And the thing is, no one expected this. Otherwise, they would have taken precautions. So my father-in-law tells them to try to find someone else, and if not, he will go. But thankfully, they contact one of the guests who is a mullah, not sure if I spelt that right, like a religious figure who agrees to go and explain to the guy what to do with his wife so they can consummate the marriage. But it doesn't end there. Like a week later, my wife comes and tells me that apparently something happened because the next day the bride was seen walking funny, and apparently they had to contact a gynecologist because something had happened during the wedding night that actually hurt the poor girl. We never got to know what it was that he did or they tried that went wrong, or the outcome after. Keep in mind, this is really embarrassing for them, so they tried to keep it as low as possible. We only found out because they called my father-in-law first to try to go talk to the guy. So obviously, this was in a very rural area in a small village of a Muslim country. Very hard to understand for many of us, but it is one of my favorite stories that I heard. I doubt this happens in many arranged marriages, but hey, it happened in at least one. Male Muslim here. I married less than a week ago and want to share. Hopefully someone manages to see this. Like a lot of the stories here, I guess it was technically arranged, but not really. It was a rainy day when my family and I went to go meet my now wife and family-in-law. It wasn't a bad kind of rain though. The drizzle was light, the air was crisp, and even though there were clouds everywhere, it felt kinda bright. When we were welcomed in and settled, there were a few silly little things I noticed that actually perked me up a little. A Nintendo DS on their TV stand, books like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Redwall on the shelves, a DuckTales DVD sitting on top the player, the smell of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies wafting from the kitchen. Of course, this didn't necessarily mean anything, as the items could have belonged to anyone in the home, but they were all things that spoke to me, and unfortunately, they are things that many Muslims I met never seemed to be into. If there weren't things that the girl I was about to meet was into, then at least there was someone in this place that I had a connection with. We were seated for what couldn't have been more than a minute or two before her mother got up to get some refreshments and I guess check on her. My mom got up to help, but I'm pretty sure it was because there was a chance she could scope out my wife. In the middle of our idle chit-chat with her brother and father, I overheard her being introduced to my mother in the kitchen. My heart rate immediately went up because I knew she was going to be out soon and then all eyes would be on us. My mom was the first one to appear with a tray of South Asian sweets. Then her mom with some appetizers, samosas, and spring rolls, if you are wondering. And finally, her with a plate of cookies. She was beautiful. I was surprised my jaw didn't hit the floor when she walked through the door. I had to practically peel my eyes away from her. Obviously, I wanted to show that I'm a good Muslim and tried not to look at her for longer than what would be appropriate. But I found myself looking at her every chance I could because she was so beautiful. After being grilled a bit, the conversation switches to her and I'm ecstatic because I get a break and I can stare at her. Then we start getting into hobbies, likes, dislikes, and personality traits. They ask what I like to do in my free time. My response is a little vague because lots of video games isn't something they likely wanted to hear, but I do mention video games. Her mom groans that we would be a good match since she always has her face buried in her DS these days. We dive more into our personal hobbies and I bet I'm growing a dumb smile on my face because it's crazy how much we have in common. Her mom says something along the lines of how she still spends most of her time watching Disney and Nickelodeon. She gets a little annoyed and says that she doesn't spend all her time watching those channels. When I pipe in and mention that that's all I really watch as well, aside from something like The Walking Dead, she smiles and turns towards me with a cute little half sheepish smile on her face, and we make real eye contact for the first time. It felt like an eternity and a millisecond all at once. We break it off and I could feel the heat emanating from my face. I'll fast forward since this is getting a little long. We get married. Our first moment of intimacy was probably after the wedding festivities had died down and we didn't have to meet and greet a billion people. During our honeymoon, we went to an outdoor ice skating rink. She had never been before, but I had, so I thought it might be fun for her to learn and me to teach. It's not very hard, and she got the hang of it pretty quickly. And I had a good time just skating with her, holding onto my arm and chatting away. After a little bit, we decided to sit on the benches at the side of the rink. I stepped away to get hot chocolates for us to sip while we relaxed. One of her friends tipped me off beforehand that she really likes Christmassy peppermint drinks, so I made sure to get that and asked the guy to add extra whipped cream for her. I watched intently as she took her first sip and a smile drew across her face. I told her that I had heard that she really likes peppermint, and she said she did. I laughed and asked her if she also really likes whipped cream because it was all over her lips and nose. She giggled and rubbed her nose. I laughed and went back to people watching when she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. I know a kiss on the cheek isn't much, but I absolutely melted and was a little speechless while she just giggled at the whipped cream on my cheek and said that it should be gone now. Not one to miss a cliche moment, I let her know that she missed the spot and leaned in for our first kiss. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't strange, it was just an amazing moment. We might have had an arranged marriage, but we also had the time to develop into a relationship. And as for the sex, holy moly. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. I'll see you on the next story.